Welcome to another episode of the Interesting Lawyers Podcast, brought to you from Podcast Junkies Studio in Boca Raton, Florida. I'm your host, Russell Adler, and today we have a very special and very prominent guest. Stuart Grossman is a 50-plus year trial lawyer and the founder of the law firm of Grossman, Roth, Yaffa Cohen, clearly one of the most prominent firms in the state of Florida, if not the United States. Their main office is in Miami. They have a Boca Raton office. They have 13 lawyers and 7 medical investigators. You ever heard of that one before? We'll get into that. They handle medical malpractice, personal injury, wrongful death, products liability, class action cases, and a lot of other interesting cases. You know, when I met Stuart about 30 years ago, it was, I think, probably just him and Neil Roth, and then they expanded to Gary Cohen and Andy Yaffa, and what a great bunch of guys. And I've always really admired them, and I'm just really grateful that Stuart is here joining us. Stuart, hello, good morning, and thank you so much. Please say hello to our listeners.
Good morning, listeners, and a special good morning to you, Russ. It's good to see you.
Thank you so much. Stuart, I know that you were in trial last week. What kind of case were you trying last week? You're still at it after 50 years, huh?
Yeah. I was brought in to try a case against the Ford Motor Company involving a high-performance car called a Shelby GT350 and overheating problems that it had that kept it from living up to its promise as a race car.
And when you told me that, I'm thinking to myself, who better than Stuart Grossman, the highest octane, highest horsepower lawyer that there is, to try this case? How fitting that he's brought into a case involving Shelby Cobras. Yeah. So you're not just a personal injury lawyer or medical malpractice. I know you've handled all sorts of cases, but you know, do you enjoy trying cases even like that involving cars?
I enjoy trying cases. I think that the courtroom is where I'm among my happiest moments. I can't explain why. I'm the first person in my family that graduated college, so I never had an uncle who I looked up to as an attorney or something like that. But for me, it just evolved into the place that I am very, very comfortable.
And to that end, I was also wondering, Stuart, few lawyers even make it 50 years in practice. You're one of them. And you're still at it, and you probably, you know, how many cases a year are you trying these days?
Well, I don't try that many. It's probably 2 or 3, but that seems to be the national average because mediation and these arbitrations and what they call alternative dispute resolution have taken over. Back in the day, when we were all trying cases, a lot of them during the year, they've been supplanted by these by mediation. It's an industry, and it must work because the parties seem to walk away happy.
You know, if I was to get into all of your background, all of your accomplishments, all of the awards and recognitions, it would take up the entire episode. I know that's out there and it's available, but I was saying to myself on the way over here, this guy is a legend. Everyone knows who he is. Never heard a bad thing about you from anyone, which I think is fantastic. But I'm asking myself, why is he still doing it? Why aren't you on a golf course or on a boat somewhere, you know, retired? Why are you still at it, Stu?
That's a good one because my best pal is Greg Norman, who's, the LIV, organized LIV golf against the PGA and whatnot. But I just am very comfortable with my life. I'm comfortable working. I think I came from working people. And to me, it doesn't feel like work. So it's just part of the overall life and lifestyle. I'm fortunate to have a home here and in California, and I'm able to bounce back between the two and enjoy myself.
That's fantastic. And you seem to really have a passion for it still. Do you still have that passion?
No question.
That fire?
No question. No question. First of all, and you know this, you can't fake it. You just can't fake it. You can't fake it to clients, to the court, and you certainly can't fake it to juries because those 12 eyes see right through you.
So, Stuart, another thing that you've been known for, especially in the past several years, are these mass casualty cases that you've been involved in. A couple of years back, they had the FIU walkway collapse, where this walkway literally collapsed onto traffic and crushed people in cars and killed quite a few people. I know you were deeply involved in that case. I know the global settlement for that case was a total of about $103 million. Then you also represented 6 families of slain students in the Marjorie Stoneman Douglas mass shooting case as well. That case got resolved for about $150 million globally between all the families. Can you just briefly share your remembrances and experience from the Marjorie Stoneman Douglas case and your involvement in it, because it really tugged at the heartstrings. And I can only imagine being involved as a lawyer and dealing with these families. And again, I thought, who better than Stuart to be involved in this? So what are your thoughts?
Well, I didn't think I would bring this up, but I lost my own daughter when she was 15.
Sorry.
To a rare form of cancer. And so relating to parents who've lost a child is something that obviously through a great deal of pain seems to come naturally to me. I know how they feel and what they feel, although I must say no two people mourn exactly alike. The Stoneman Douglas case was particularly painful because these children were not taken by an act of God and not taken by an illness, not even taken by an accident. They were just murdered and going to school, in their classrooms, in their hallways, dropped off in the morning, kissed goodbye, expected to be home later that evening with their families. And all of these families' lives were disrupted. And it was a privilege to be the lawyer for about a half a dozen of those families. But it's something I'll never forget. And each of them have grieved and continue to grieve in their own ways. The money is no substitute for the children, and I'm going to make that statement now. The money is designed to help you get over the mental anguish that you're suffering every day of your life. People in those families given up careers, have gone to part-time, marriages have dissolved, illnesses within the parents have taken place. It's wildfire what Nicholas Cruz caused that day.
It's so gripping, and it's just one of those cases I'm sure that you will never forget. I mean, you've had thousands of cases, so many great results, but you're right. At the end of the day, money is just money. It doesn't fix or undo what's been done or turn down the clock. Turn back the clock.
No, it doesn't. It doesn't.
Yeah, every case I tried, and I probably got this line from you, but I used to say to the jury, if all we could ask you to do is turn back the clock and make this unhappen, that's what we'd want you to do.
Yeah.
But there is, that we can't do that, and this is what the system provides.
That's right. And be fortunate, those of you listening to this, that this system protects you and your families, because it is very unique to the United States, and certainly unique within the United States to Florida.
Yep. And Stuart, most recently, you were, not only did you represent the families of several of the victims, but you were lead counsel in the litigation arising out of the Surfside condominium building collapse down in Miami. I know that 98 people perished in that tragedy.
Yes.
I think you had the families, you represented the families of 11 of them, but because of your direct efforts as lead counsel, and which means liaison on behalf of everybody to the court, to the defense, and also to make the case or to try to get the case settled, you were able to achieve a global settlement of $997 million.
Actually, there's been a payment recently to put it over the $1 billion mark.
Wow.
But let me answer your question.
Please.
I was honored to be appointed liaison counsel, and my young female partner, Rachel, was appointed co-lead counsel. So we had two of the few leadership positions on this. And while you talk about 98 people dead and the amount of money that was collected for them, I think the lasting story is absolutely that buildings now are undergoing rigorous examinations. And when the word comes back now that we have a problem with our building, now the homeowners association can't be sheepish and be embarrassed in the elevator to tell their neighbors, we're going to assess you. They have to be upfront and active and proactive in making the assessments, collecting the assessments, and getting the repair work done. Otherwise, we're going to have a lot of these building collapses. Why? Because we're aging. The buildings are aging, and salt water kills. And other events that take place, like construction next door, kills. And original defects in the planning killed. Do you know, Russell, that building had an extra floor? An extra floor on top that was never designed or approved. Can you believe that?
Just so the developer could make a little more money?
Well, and so Surfside looked the other way, or whomever the officials were that rubber stamped this thing. They snuck in an extra floor.
Unbelievable.
Of course it's unbelievable. And there was notification that the pool was leaking and that the water was flooding the garage and everything else. And they got a report from the engineers, and the engineers said what to do, and they sat on it. And disgracefully, the homeowners association's lawyers, who contributed mightily to this settlement, they didn't push their clients to pay. Why? Because they want to keep them as happy clients. Those days, I hope, are over with for everyone within the sound of my voice. You deserve to protect one another and to know the truth about your building.
I remember reading about the law firm. I know I'm not going to name them, but it was a large, prominent firm. And I was glad that they were held accountable for this, because I know how intricately they get involved in the workings of the condo boards. I think a lot of people, especially non-lawyers, lose sight of the fact that lawsuits benefit society. Lawsuits make society safer. I was going to start with the fact that one of the things that you are directly responsible for is the fact that Miami police no longer use chokeholds on people. I can only imagine the thousands of chokeholds, because they could be effective, I guess too effective sometimes, to be used. And that doesn't happen anymore as a result of some litigation that you spearheaded back in the day. But
yeah, the facts surrounding that case are likewise emblazoned in my brain. A young man who lived in the Liberty City area needed his car repaired. And unlike those of us that take our cars to the dealership or to a mechanic to have it repaired, in that neighborhood, what you would do is you would drive up to a park where an itinerant mechanic would be working. And you'd wait, and while he worked on the car, overheating, whatever it might be. A young man got into the back seat and was eating a fried chicken lunch while his car was worked on. Well, he pulled in the wrong way. In other words, he pulled in opposing the way the traffic was flowing. And so police came by and saw his car improperly parked, got him out of the car, rousted him out of the car, found that he had a gun under the front seat, and then proceeded to arrest him. And he said, "I'm just eating lunch. I'm here to get my car fixed. I'm not doing anything." And he resisted getting into the squad car by stretching his arms out, like an NBA player to guard a shot. Mm-hmm. And about that time, another policeman pulled up, saw this, jumped out of his car and said, "I'll handle this." Both the victim and the police officer were African American. And the policeman threw this young man to the ground, put him in a chokehold, which cuts off his air. If you're not familiar with that, you have arteries on the side of your neck called the carotids. And he put his arm around the carotid arteries and cut off his oxygen. Well, after doing that for a couple minutes, the young man was unconscious, but more importantly, had a devastating heart attack and was rendered comatose from that moment on. And so they picked him up, and he went off to his mother's, where he lay in bed for the next 20 years until he died. Part of that settlement was they had to give him $1,000 every day he was in bed, apart from the cash that was paid. And his mother was a very strong construction worker herself, who held me accountable for everything I tried to do to get this case concluded. She was one of the toughest clients I've ever had, and I praise her for that. She really held my feet as well as the county's feet to the fire in equal measure.
Wow.
And that's what happened. Well, in an epilogue, a young man was going through training at the Miami Police, at the at the City of Miami Police Department, and he called his dad and he said, "Hey, Dad, you know Stuart Grossman, isn't he a friend of yours?" And the father said, "Yeah, why are you asking?" So they got his picture in the training room and said, "If you apply a chokehold, you're going to meet this guy." And so I was floored by that they paid attention to me, and I was certainly hoping I wasn't getting stopped for anything.
Certainly.
But yes, the chokehold is deadly. And my expert was a fellow who devised the chokehold. And he said that here's the way you properly do it. And the most important thing that people don't know about the chokehold is once you've applied it and the person is rendered unconscious, you don't just drop them to the ground. You have to lay them down very carefully. Make certain their airway's okay. Don't bang their heads. Make certain, now that you've rendered someone unconscious, you got to take care of them. That wasn't done here. They piled on, they piled off. They looked at him. What's his problem?
Yep. Well, the police are not the only ones paying attention to you because of your past accomplishments and the change that you brought. I know that your whole career you've leaned heavily into medical malpractice litigation, not just against bad doctors or hospitals, but involving medical devices that hurt people. I know you guys handled some cases with these eye drops. People were losing their sight and getting terrible infections, and it goes on and on. But in my research about you, I know that insurance companies, which are certainly terrified of you for good reason, that they have invited you to come and speak to them. And they've embraced you in that way because they don't want to face you either. So tell us about that experience.
Well,
Talk about that.
Okay. There was something that you said in the beginning about trying to change things, and hopefully no one having much negative stuff to say about me. And I think that when I've dealt with insurance companies, as disrespectful as they might be to their insureds, I've tried to talk to them as individuals and as companies. I can't turn them around. On occasion I do. But when we don't, we get a judgment against them. I'm not the kind of lawyer that rubs their nose in it. And those that I felt left on good terms with my firm have on occasion asked us to come back and teach what are we doing wrong. And I thought that was a very high compliment. But more important than the compliment is that I'd like to get them on the same page. Because when someone is legitimately injured, why put them through the cost of litigation? Why put them through the agony of the years of waiting for a recovery? When you know in the end you did it. Just face up. But unfortunately, not all carriers behave that way.
Right, but I'm sure some medical providers and medical device manufacturers, as a result of their dealings with you, have changed their ways, taken products off the market, changed their training protocols,
Well, the eye
changed certain things.
Yes, in the eye drops case we just came from yesterday in San Diego, these eye drops have caused enucleations, which means the actual removal of the eyeball from patients because of their contamination. And now look at it. The company that made this product in India is now belly up, but the distributors who sold it are responsible. And thank heavens for that, because no one should be blinded from innocently using a medication to prevent eye disease. That's crazy.
It is. And I don't think anyone's gotten as many verdicts and as many large verdicts as you have in these malpractice cases that were difficult. I'll tell you that certain times when I was practicing law, and this goes back, 15 or 20 years ago, every now and then I'd get like a medical malpractice case, and I would immediately say to myself, as good as I am and as great as I think I am, I have no business handling a case like this, let alone the resources. And so I called up your partner, Gary Cohen, who's an old friend, and I know that Gary is regarded as truly one of the best,
Fabulous lawyer.
but one of the best and smartest malpractice lawyers. And man, I know he's been through battles because these defense attorneys, especially in the med mal cases, they're a special breed, not necessarily in a good way.
Yeah. No, I think of all of the cases that we call torts, T-O-R-T-S, I think that malpractice clearly are the most difficult cases to prove and to prevail in, and Gary is indeed a master.
Yeah, but so are you. And,
Thank you.
I remember years ago I was talking to some defense lawyer about you. We were just chatting about you, and he says to me, that's Stuart Grossman. He has this way about him. He has this like a rabbinical type of look. And he said, Stuart Grossman looks at juries and he tells them what he wants them to do, and they do it. And I was just really impressed by that. I'm sure they haven't listened to you in every case, but the reality is that you have built up such a track record and such an amazing reputation, and you're so well liked by everybody that I just want you to know that I have always admired you.
Thank you so much.
About that. I don't want to say I've been jealous, but I've certainly been envious. And, you've just made such an impact on the practice of law and on the justice system. So,
Thanks, Russell. Well, I've tried. My wife says I say that too much. Sometimes I wind up saying to her, I did the best I could. She says, you say that too much. So I'm not going to say it now. But between you and me, I did the best I could.
Well, that's pretty evident. So, Stuart, let's come to the present.
Yes.
Okay. I see you've grown your firm.
Yeah.
You have about 14 lawyers.
Yeah.
And they do all sorts of other things. Class actions. What are some of the new areas that you guys are practicing in?
Well, on the malpractice side, we had two tremendous cases resolved against a major accounting firm and a national law firm in the past year and a half that were settled for staggering amounts because they caused that much damage. So we've expanded malpractice into other professions as well. On the class action side, we handled the case that probably everybody knows when the state of Florida cut down all of the trees, alleging that they were going to get infections from citrus canker.
Ah, yes.
We handled
the
that
citrus
class
trees.
action on behalf of the citizens of Florida. And then a couple of years ago, we concluded something called a bank overdraft, in which the major banks were billing their own customers for fees for things that they didn't do, which was overdrafting their bank statements, their bank accounts. They rearranged their accounts so that they'd have a certain number of deposits, the larger ones, a certain number of withdrawals, the larger ones coming first, that would automatically result in an overdraft, and they wouldn't give them credit for deposits that were made in the interim that didn't cause an overdraft. And that was very shady. And that was over $1 billion dollars in recovery, but that's because they caused it. And so we've had these business type cases, these malpractice cases that expanded. Then, as you say, we've done these products that are defective. We've done straightforward negligence cases, automobile cases, and of course aviation. We've had a specialty in plane crashes and helicopters and things of that nature over the years. The answer to your question is we've expanded because our fields of interest have broadened. And that's something that I don't see happening much with the younger generation of lawyers now.
I see a lot of defense firms expanding. I know that in Florida the population has increased.
Yes.
There's more bad driving. There's more claims. There's more litigation, and some of these firms are expanding into hundreds and hundreds of lawyers. What are your plans for expansion?
None. We're done. We have a few of my lawyers are simply of counsel, and really there's 10 that show up and work at it every day. But I find in a boutique or selective law firm, you can't really get any larger than that without losing the day-to-day contact from the senior guy to the very junior guy. And really, when you're working on a case, you're all even.
Mm-hmm.
Senior guy, junior guy, you're all mixed in there together, drawing assignments, doing things, helping one another, dialoguing with one another, strategizing with one another. And if you just add more people to the mix, it makes the communication more difficult.
Right.
And that's something you can't overcome. So why build in a problem to your organization by overpopulating it?
Instead of learning from the mistakes of others, because others have made those mistakes and just gotten too big. Stuart, as a consultant who works with law firms and advises law firms on my side of the coin, I noticed that you're structured in a way that's really quite different and unique. In addition to your 13 lawyers, you have 7 medical investigators and 1 liability investigator. Can you visit with us about that, talk about that?
Sure.
Because I've really never heard of that per se. Sure. Not that firms don't use nursing experts on cases and paralegals like that, but not with these titles. And having dealt with them, I know what they do. Talk to us about that.
Okay. Look, what is a medical investigator at our law firm? A medical investigator at our law firm is a person who, by training, has been involved in the area of medicine for some number of years. We don't have younger people doing this job. What is their function? Well, their function is to do a lot of the initial interviews with clients that have, in particular, medical malpractice cases, of which we have a considerable volume, and sifting through their medical records after they tell us the story, then helping to retain the appropriate expert to evaluate the client's story plus their records. They have to add up. If there's a disparity between the two, you turn that case down. And then retaining the expert, communicating with the expert, and then coming back to the lawyer and saying, here's what my investigation has shown. And then they turn the case over to the investigator to either accept, to the lawyer, either to accept or to reject. And we're rejecting now about we're accepting about 1 in every 13 and a half cases that come to us on malpractice. It's that hard. And that's because a bad result in medicine does not equal malpractice. Things do happen. People don't wake up from anesthesia. People don't get better through surgery. Cancer isn't cured. Heart attacks aren't solved, even with timely intervention. And so most of those cases get turned down, but we give it all we've got in terms of looking at them and analyzing them, and we rely heavily on these full-time investigators. Why full-time and why working for us? Because of quality control. This way we don't have to wonder where are they, what are they doing, is this, and there's constant dialogue every day, throughout the day, with your investigators and the lawyers. So it's a system that we believe is expensive but works.
I was going to say, knowing how expensive it is to fund a medical malpractice case, to advance the costs,
yes.
and how much time it is, and how much is at stake, I know how selective you have to be. The few malpractice cases that I handled, even I rejected a large number of them. And it's also widely known. I mean, I know you get a lot of your cases, not just from the general public, but also from lawyers, even lawyers who handle malpractice cases, as well as other types, because they know that you're the best at what you do, and they feel their client deserves you. And candidly, that's why I sent cases over.
Well,
I felt my clients deserved representation like you guys offered, as opposed to, what I could do for them.
Well, that's the way you were practicing was at the highest level, because we're always taught as both a professional principle and a moral principle. If you are at all reluctant or hesitant or think that something can be better accomplished, to pass it on. You hope your doctor does that, and he doesn't sit on you as a patient when he could have sent you to a specialist, and maybe you could have gotten better. So it's really that way throughout life if we care to do that. But the pressures, the economic pressures of the practice are such that you have lawyers who will hold on to cases that they shouldn't hold on to. And that's, as I say, a moral as well as an economic issue. But we're appreciative for our referring attorneys. We're a non-advertising firm. We have a zero advertising budget. We've got a website. But
And it's very nice, your new website. I like it, by the way.
thank you very much. We spent a lot of time and effort on that. But I think that that we're sort of old school, and who knows, with the way television advertising for lawyers has gone today, it's hard to say that we won't be extinct at some point or forced to advertise. But right now we're okay.
I don't think that day's going to come, especially for firms like yours. But we'll see, because the law is always changing. What about the fact that in medical malpractice cases, and correct me if I'm wrong, my understanding is that because of professional liability policies, the insured physician, has some say over whether a case gets settled or not. The state of Florida, and I'm sure some other states have this as well, have a database where all settlements of medical malpractice cases get reported to the database. And some doctors consider that a black mark or a scarlet letter against them. And their attitude is, well, look, I paid my premium. I have this great law firm defending me, so screw it. I don't want that mark against me, so let's not settle it. Has that become a factor in many of your cases that have ended up not settling and gone to trial instead, where the doctor literally gets in the way because of either ego or failure to take responsibility for what they did or any other reason?
You have opened up a very significant topic. I don't blame a doctor who's being sued for wanting to be defended if what he did is defensible. I don't blame his insurance company for wanting to defend him, as long as they understand they're going to have to pay a judgment if he loses.
And sometimes more than the policy limits.
And sometimes more than the policy limits under what we call bad faith. But what I do mind is when a doctor, because of ego or self-interest, doesn't listen to not only his insurance company, but more importantly, his insurance company's lawyers and their experts who say, "Doctor, you committed malpractice. Please don't hold us up because of this clause in the contract that says you have to give permission for the case to settle." There's no place for that, in my opinion. And if you want to defend yourself better, don't commit malpractice. But if you have, and if this lawyer has busted his rear end to try to win for you, and the experts have analyzed the case, and they've all come to this conclusion, this case needs to be resolved. For heaven's sakes, let the carrier do its job and get it paid. And more importantly, let's let the patient get a recovery and go about their lives. How is it possible that after injuring someone, you now have the ability to prolong the pain? And that's wrong. That shouldn't be allowed. But if they continue to put that in certain policies, they pay the price because they will lose. And as you said accurately, they will have to pay even more than what the insurance policy itself said.
It's great to get more, but it's just a big strain on everyone's resources and time, all for that reason, that holdup.
It's a big strain, and it's costly. At the end of the day, no one saves anything. And by the way, most people have no idea if their doctors ever committed malpractice or been found guilty of malpractice or whatnot. I think that database is mostly used, frankly, by lawyers who just want to know something about this person.
Yep, but it is public record, and it's right there on the
There's
internet.
nothing wrong with that.
Oh, I use it.
Yeah, nothing wrong with that before you pick a doctor to know what is your track record.
Yeah, it's pretty scary. It really is. And I'm sure that some of the monster verdicts that you've gotten in some of these cases are probably cases like that. Because if the defense experts can't really defend it, but it's forced to trial, and you show up, it's not going to end well for the carrier.
Well, the term of a monster verdict to me begs the question of what was the monster injury, because the idea between a jury verdict and the malpractice or the injury that was caused is that they should approximate each other. If you have caused someone paraplegia, quadriplegia, death, whatever it might be, those are huge losses. You can call them monsters. And if a verdict rises to that same level, you can call that a monster, but it too has to dramatically take care of what this person has been through. So stop doing this, and these will come down. And the courts regulate verdicts that are out of control regularly.
Right. I know that both trial judges and appellate courts have the authority and the final say about reducing verdicts that are excessive to make them more reasonable in their view.
Not only do they have the power, they exercise the power.
I can attest to that personally, having had verdicts taken away. I wanted to share with you the small difference that I made to society in my own small scale. We were talking about that earlier. When I sued LA Fitness for not having a defibrillator and my client had a cardiac arrest, he ultimately died. The defibrillator would have saved him, according to my expert. I won that case. It was the first case that was won. But the appellate court took away my verdict and said that all they have to do is call 911, which I felt was ridiculous. But my point is, at the end of the day, LA Fitness put defibrillators in all of their clubs because they didn't want to get sued again. And so, I can go to bed at night knowing that I probably saved a lot of lives of people who've had cardiac arrest, because at strenuous exercise, you're 100 times more likely to have a cardiac arrest than you are sitting here talking to me. So I share in that pride that you have. In your case, well-deserved and exponentially greater than mine. But still, it's just nice to know that in the years I practiced, I made a difference.
Well, not only did you make a difference, but you've set a standard for the whole industry, not just LA Fitness, which of course caused me to think, when you won this case, did LA Fitness have to have fire extinguishers in their buildings? And if so, what, on the remote possibility there'd be a fire? But yet, knowing that they're pushing people to their physiological limits during strenuous exercise, the likelihood of that being, as you say, hundreds of times greater under those circumstances, proven, logical, everybody knows it.
Yep.
But no, you don't have to, because there was no duty? What are you talking about, no duty? So they've done it voluntarily now, and of course they have. And you know what? They can do it, just say, look, because of Adler, this is what we're doing. And not care that they're doing it. But you care, and any sane person would care to know that there's a defibrillator there. There's one in my house. What if somebody comes to dinner and they have an issue?
Right. Well,
I mean, what's my responsibility? I guess I don't have a duty, but what's the right thing to do here?
yeah.
You
Well,
know, but a business like that, excuse me, a business like that of pushing people to physical exertion, how could it not be their duty?
agreed. Agreed. It was an emerging standard back 12 or 13 years ago when I tried the case, and it was analogous to fire extinguishers because when they first came out, they weren't required everywhere either. But slowly over time, they became commonplace, and I saw one in my pickleball club today, and I felt good about that because you're right. It's helping society reach emerging standards and all of that. Stuart, we only have a few minutes left. I know we have some stories to tell. I'd love you to come back in the future, and we could go over that. But there's one important thing I want to ask you about, and it has to do with the current state of affairs in the legal system. And I mentioned to you before we started how ever since COVID in 2020, a lot of court proceedings, hearings, depositions, mediations, and whatnot, are no longer held in person. They're held on Zoom. They're held remotely. And I know that for seasoned older lawyers like you, that's actually a benefit because you can get a lot more done and you could be much more efficient and productive. But there's a price to be paid by young lawyers. Some lawyers barred 2020 to the present have never even been to a live hearing in court or a live deposition or mediation. I can't even imagine that. So what has been your experience just dealing with younger lawyers, either as employees or on the other side or being in these remote hearings? How is it different from your point of view?
Well, you you hit the nail on the head. Let me remind the audience what it used to be like. 2 or 3 times a week, given judges would hold hearings. And at those hearings, all of the lawyers involved in all of the cases on their hearings, unless they had special appointments, which were rare, would congregate in a courthouse. And you'd wait in a hallway to be called in. And in that process, you would meet colleagues, cases would be discussed, cases would be resolved. Issues for that hearing would be resolved. But there was a society that was formed and a certain collegiality that was formed and an understanding of what it's like to have to go downtown, put the client through this, incur the expense, let's try to work something out. Now, you have a problem, let's just get a Zoom on this. Let's do this on that. Let's, because you don't pay the price. Now, I think it has been beneficial in terms of the cost of litigation. It's been held down. I think that it is very convenient. You don't have to leave your office. In many cases, they don't leave their home, certain lawyers, to what they call practicing law. They do it from their kitchen. If that's the way it goes, that's the way it goes. But there is no question of what you brought up. That is that the training that they would have gotten in a courthouse, making these observations, taking these depositions live, attending hearings live, meeting other lawyers live, has eaten into their experience. And I don't know how they're going to make it up. And so when they work for us, it's a different circumstance because we don't pay attention to that. You show up, you get there, here's what we're doing and whatnot. And while Zoom is a part of their career, the majority of their career is face-to-face interaction with witnesses and going out to their homes and seeing them and flying to Philadelphia to see the experts at a hospital or California, whatever it might be. So, but you have to be careful of it, Russell, because my goodness, it's gotten to be so different and so remote that I do think the younger lawyers are suffering.
And now we've arrived at my final question, and perhaps the most difficult one, but I'm going to ask you anyway.
Sure.
Sorry to put you on the spot.
It's all right.
What is your advice to young, ambitious litigation attorneys who want to grow up and be like you, as I once did? I still do, but my ship has sailed. Theirs hasn't. What's your best advice to them, Stuart?
There's several things I would encourage you to do, and I'll conclude by the one that I think is the most important. Try to gain a mentor. Don't make it a financial question before you take a job or don't take a job. You have a right to be selective, but you have a greater obligation to get trained by the best person or institution that can help you train. And sometimes they're not the most lucrative jobs, but at least you'll have an opportunity to encounter good colleagues who will teach you good practice methods. So try to gain a mentor. Secondly, go to the courthouse, watch trials, cover hearings, do everything that you can to see how lawyers function in a day-to-day basis when they're not on television. We're not doing a podcast. This is what we're doing today is with Russell and myself is having a freewheeling discussion about the state of the practice and things that we've been through collectively as lawyers. Your history is yet to be made. How do you want to make it? Because you're going to need help. You'll always stand on the shoulders of the lawyers that came before you. But the most important advice I'll give you is that as you watch other lawyers and you get ideas or thoughts, be yourself. You can never go out and imitate somebody because you thought they were great on screen or in person or whatever. They may give you the idea of how to do it or what the end game is or what the strategy is, but definitely put it in your own terms with your own sincerity and your own intelligence so that when questioned, it comes from the heart as opposed to something that you might have observed, which you won't be able to defend because you didn't feel that way in the first place. And for those of you that are doing it that way, meaning you're imitating something or you're not sincere in what you're doing, I wish you'd find something else to do because there's enough lawyers and you deserve an opportunity to do something you care about as opposed to something you want to imitate. This is a tough life. It's demanding. You know it. I know it. Anyone that has been a lawyer knows it to do it right. It's a tough road to hoe, but it's so worth it.
As it says on your website, fight injustice with intellect and imagination.
I hope so.
You got it.
I hope we have.
Well, the great, legendary Stuart Grossman, I am honored to have you on my podcast. Thank you so much.
My privilege. You do an excellent job, as you always do in anything you do.
Thank you so much. I'll make sure that doesn't get edited out. And you're always welcome to come back. I'd love your partners to come back. We'll talk about that, and we'll even grab some lunch.
I'm going to tell them about the experience.
Thank you so much. And that wraps this episode of the Interesting Lawyers Podcast. Thank you so much for tuning in, and we'll see you next time.